Lovely. So we're now on recording. And as I said, anybody who wishes to be off camera, feel free to turn your camera off. But we're more than happy for you to have your camera on and for you to unmute when you have questions or to use the chat box. And I will now hand over to Will. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. My name is Will Calling. I'm Head of Quality and Diversity here at the University of Wolverhampton. Before that, I was involved in wider participation, which for those who don't know, HE lingo is basically the work of universities to expand their intakes beyond the kind of traditional groups in society who go to university, and to actually encourage more people from disadvantaged backgrounds to study. And I've been involved in equality and diversity campaigning since before I went to university myself, when I was a sixth form student and I was doing things like LGBT activism. So great to have people here today, and great for people to kind of catch up on this on YouTube. The way we're going to do this is quite informal, because I'm sure there's always a danger of death by PowerPoint. I've got three sections. First bit is just a bit about what is equality and diversity, then the arguments for equality and diversity, and then finally just some tips about the kind of obvious things you can do to improve equality and diversity practice. I will stop and ask if people have any questions or relevant points, but also feel free to pop questions in the chat box as well. So in terms of equality, what is equality and diversity? The thing I will always say about this is the key thing about the key word in equality and diversity is the and. Because what that tells you is it's clearly two concepts that are distinct but linked. Equality is about how do we ensure that everybody has the same opportunity, the same respect, the same treatment, not always the same success, but certainly you're looking at things like the same opportunity, the same sense of respect. Diversity is the recognition that we're all different, that we come from different backgrounds, we have different experiences, we have different lifestyles, we have different beliefs and traditions. And when you put them together, it is the kind of understanding that if we want everybody to have the same opportunity, then we can't treat everybody the same. Because if we treat everybody the same, but they're different, then how we treat them is going to actually lead to differences. And very simple example, imagine I'm standing in front of you and you can see me in all my 6'4" glory. If I say I'm going to put something on a shelf that is 6 foot, and then I bring somebody who is 5 foot, yes, technically that shelf is treating both me and the person who's shorter than me equally, but clearly I have an advantage to reach that item compared to the person who's shorter. And so when we talk about equality and diversity, it is looking at where there is unfair advantage and how do we put in place measures to ensure that unfair advantage is removed. And you can think of equality and diversity in much the same way as you would think of a ladder. There's no more threatening than a ladder, because what we are always trying to do is, because we recognize people are different, or we recognize people should have equal opportunities and equal respect, we are trying to restore a level playing field where past discrimination, past practices, wider society has created an unfair playing field. And so, does anybody have any questions on that part of kind of like the overall big picture of equality and diversity before I talk about the groups it affects?
No comments so far in the chat box. We are quite a small group, so if anybody would like to come off mute and either share their views on those sorts of definitions. So the key thing of equality and diversity is primarily concerning 9 groups laid down by law. And I say groups, but it's 9 characteristics. And the key thing to always remember equality and diversity, it is not there's a group of people that have equality and diversity done to them or for them, and then there's everybody else. You sometimes hear people say the people with protected characteristics. Everybody has these protected characteristics, with one exception. It's not a case of them versus us. Everybody is protected by the Equality Act. It's just that certain groups of people may need more protection because they are the ones that have been traditionally discriminated against. To go through, and this is why I try and do all without slides, so this is a bit of a party trick, but there's firstly there is ethnicity. The category that is ethnicity or race is much broader than you may think just listening to that word. It often does cover different ethnic groups, so white, black, Asian, but it also drills down into things such as nationality, also drives down into skin color in quite a specific way, because in some ethnic minority communities there is a tradition of colorism where lighter skinned people receive preferential treatment versus darker skinned people. You go to places such as, say, the Caribbean or the Indian subcontinent, that is a legacy of British colonialism. So you have ethnicity, you then have sex, which is quite narrowly defined, and that is about between men and women. But you also have gender reassignment status as a third characteristic, and that is whether somebody is trans or cisgendered. You have disability, which, much like ethnicity, is more broadly defined than you would expect in a colloquial language, because it is basically somebody with a physical or mental impairment that is long term, so roughly about 3 months, between 3 and 6 months is the usual standard, that will stop them doing everyday activities or severely hamper their ability to do everyday activities. And so the key thing with this is, the person doesn't need to consider themselves disabled. Nobody else has to consider themselves disabled. They have a physical or mental impairment that stops them doing everyday activities for a prolonged period. They are covered by the Equality Act's provision when it comes to disability. And the example I always use, if you imagine, well, this works better when I'm actually in the office, but if you imagine after talking to you today, I actually have a reason to leave my house, which doesn't happen very often in these coronavirus times. But if I had a reason to leave my house, I walked across the street and I then got hit by a car and broke my leg, and my leg was in plaster for 9 months. Even though nobody would consider themselves disabled, everybody would just say, well, you've just broken your leg and you'll get better. I would be covered by the Equality Act's provisions in the sense of being able to get reasonable adjustments for what happened to my leg. So you then have marriage and civil partnership status. So whether you're married, single, in a civil partnership, you then have pregnancy. Now the key thing with the pregnancy status, it only applies to expectant mothers or people with children, people who are pregnant, and people who are on maternity leave. It does not apply after somebody comes back from maternity leave. So that's the one example of something that's actually quite specifically limited. So it's basically a way of protecting people from being discriminated against whilst they're getting ready to go on maternity leave and when they're on maternity leave. But for example, once somebody comes back, say after the child has turned 1 year old, doesn't mean the protections for the mother continue. You have age, making sure people don't experience age discrimination, whether they're too young or too old, inverted commas. You have religion and belief, which is primarily focused on making sure people aren't discriminated against due to their religion, but it does extend into some deeply held belief systems that aren't linked to religion, but do form part of people's identity. How broad that is, no one entirely knows. It's not clearly defined in case law, but there have been some examples of, say, veganism being protected under the Equality Act. And I believe I've hit all 9. I think that's all 9. I think that's all 9 I've now listed. Does anybody have any questions about those 9 protected characteristics?
There's quite a few there to go through, so just let everyone have a couple of minutes. We may have a couple more people join, Will, because I've just had a few emails saying that people haven't received the link, so I'm just sending those links. So apologies if we have a couple of interruptions when people join. Has anybody got any questions? Callum?
Sorry, I think I missed one. Well, I've only got 8. I've got ethnicity, sex, gender reassignment, disability, marriage and civil partnership status, pregnancy, age, religion and belief.
Now, which one do you think I've missed?
I was just wondering that myself.
But
I
I've
was
done, I've done the easy part, mate.
No, I've deliberately missed one. I missed one out to see if anybody would pick me up on it and whether they can
Oh.
guess what the next one is.
I'm trying to think which
tricky.
one it is now.
It's tricky like that. Can anybody guess?
This is why you didn't use PowerPoint slides, Will.
It's sexual orientation.
Ah, yes.
Sexual orientation is the missing one, and again, you know, it's quite closely, it's quite tightly defined compared to some of the emerging theories on sexual orientation. But you know, it does protect people who are heterosexual, who are homosexual and bisexual, and obviously bisexual is a fairly broad category. So you know, it does protect people from discrimination due to their sexual orientation. So there are your 9 protected characteristics, and the key thing for them is all the aspects of the Equality Act kind of apply to them. We're not going to go into too much detail about the kind of ins and outs of the Equality Act because it'd take too long, and really you're better off getting someone to come into your organisation and do training that kind of hits on specific issues that your industry will have with relation to the Equality Act. But the key thing is the Equality Act does say, with some exceptions, which it outlines, is that you shouldn't be discriminating against those 9 groups. By discrimination, let's quickly rattle this off. There are the 4 types of discrimination in the Equality Act. Direct discrimination is, I think, what most people would think of when they hear the word discrimination, which is you're making a deliberate decision to be nasty to a particular group of people, to withdraw your services, to refuse to employ them for who they are. So, for example, you say, my business will not employ women at a senior rate. That would be direct discrimination because you know what you're doing and you're doing it on purpose. Indirect discrimination is a bit different, and this is where a lot of the work on the Equality Act is, because obviously, you know, we've had laws against racial and sex discrimination since the 60s and 70s. You know, we've had laws against discrimination against disabled people since the 90s. So a lot of work had been done to kind of stamp out the direct discrimination. Indirect discrimination is when you basically operate policies or practices in a way that, without you meaning to necessarily, they actually discriminate and disadvantage a particular group of people. The classic example, which I think is a really interesting one, is a bunch of supermarkets a few years ago got basically sent to tribunal and were found having breached the Equality Act because they had been giving their male security staff, predominantly male security staff, antisocial hours bonuses, whereas they hadn't been given their predominantly female cleaning staff those same bonuses, even though their hours were broadly similar. And because what the court said was, no, we know you haven't made a decision to give your male work staff antisocial hours bonuses, but deny them to your female staff. But in practice, that is what you have done, and that is discriminatory. So that is very much the work of analysing how your business works, analysing your practices and your procedures to make sure that you are not operating in a way that is disadvantaged to a particular group of people. The third category is harassment, and that I think people kind of get what that is. That's bullying. It's if people are being bullied for who they are. Someone at work is having constant jokes made about them due to their age, for example, and being too old for a job. Again, a key thing for this is in terms of a company's liability. If you do not have good procedures in place to make sure that bullying isn't happening, that harassment isn't happening, that people have easy ways to complain if it starts happening and get it resolved, or if you kind of were alerted to it and did nothing about it, even if no one particularly senior in your organization was involved in the harassment, you are still liable because you've overseen a hostile working environment. So when it comes to harassment, this is one where it's not just what is the company doing, it's what is the company making reasonable steps to ensure that staff members don't misbehave. And a good example of that actually would be the recent Equality and Human Rights Commission's report into the Labour Party, where the key finding of that was that one of the key findings, I should say, was that actually the Labour Party hadn't been doing enough to kind of rein in and police what its employees, its agents, because it also includes volunteers, had been doing in their official capacity. And then finally, there's with victimization, which again, I think sounds fairly straightforward. Victimization is if you get a complaint or one of the first three evidences of discrimination, rather than taking it seriously, you start persecuting the person who brought the complaint. So maybe you fire them, maybe you depromote them, maybe you bully them, but it's basically about how you treat people who actually bring complaints on the Equality Act. Does anybody have any questions on those 4 types of discrimination?
Feel free to come off mute or to pop your questions in the chat box. Just while people are having a little think, I've got a question actually, Will, is a lot of what you've just talked about is obviously how the organisation itself responds to things. Is it still applicable? So if you were dealing with, so for example, in my role, I deal with other businesses, so they would be perhaps our clients, for example. So you mentioned earlier about, you know, people making jokes about your age, for example. What about if you had that from an external? So a client, for example, if a client was making comments to you around maybe your age or your race, or what can the organisation do anything about that?
It's a trickier area. Undoubtedly, but yes, I mean, if you in your work are encountering, I'm not saying you are, but if you
it's just a thought, really.
If you in your work were dealing with harassment from clients, then there should be a way for you to complain about that to your management, and your management to put in place measures to ensure that doesn't happen again. Either talking to clients, refusing to work with them in the future, etc., etc. There has been instances where, in equality case law, where that kind of issue has arisen. So, for example, for us at the university, when we go out to procurement, when we're trying to buy in services, we have quite robust language in terms of our expectations, in terms of how the companies will deal with equality issues. You know, we'll ask questions about, you know, their adherence to the Equality Act, their performance in terms of equality tribunals recently, and also we will be saying in all our policies that if they're on campus, if they're acting with university staff and students, they are subject to our equality policies. So yes, I think that is an issue for businesses. How do they interact with clients? And the key thing is making sure that any staff member that did encounter discriminatory behaviour from not just clients but also customers has a way to actually deal with those issues and stop them happening.
Yeah, it's just as I think in the university, not that it's happened to me, but I think in the university I would feel quite confident that the university would be quite happy to say, don't work with that client or don't work with that customer. I know that we share our policies with our students as well, don't we, and the expectations we have in terms of the way students treat staff. But I was just curious, I know I've worked for smaller businesses before, not necessarily where I've faced particular discrimination, but you do get comments perhaps. And because the business is reliant on the income that might be coming from that client, it can be tricky, shall we say, as to how seriously your own organisation takes that complaint. And I just wondered how much responsibility your own organisation had for that. You know, can you turn around and say, well, you didn't take it seriously, and actually they're liable for that? The
way to think of it is, it's no different to say if you if you're working in a shop and customers were being discriminatory, and you complain to your someone complained to their line manager and said, no, that person's being sexist, they're being racist, and the line manager said, well, yeah, but they're the customer's always right. You know, that's a clear cut. No, that's wrong. You've failed your duty of care to your employee, and it doesn't change if it's like you're dealing with a business. You know,
that's really helpful.
You still have a duty of care for your employee.
Absolutely. No, it's something that can happen, can't it? You see it, especially in customer service. Sometimes customers potentially say things that are really not appropriate, and I just wondered where the responsibility lay really with that. So thank you. Has anybody else got any questions on some of the ins and outs of what Will's just gone through? Quite quiet.
No, we'll
Okay.
move on to the next section. So what I want to do now is talk about the reasons for equality and diversity. I'm going to cover two off quite quickly. One is a moral argument. It's just the right thing to do. We want to live in a world where people have equality of opportunity, equality of respect. I assume that everybody here kind of agrees with that moral argument, because you've given up an hour of your day to learn more about equality and diversity. There's also, of course, the compliance argument, which, when you're trying to argue for equality and diversity in your organizations, cannot be overlooked. There is just some stuff you have to do because it's the law. And, if you find stuff that you believe is illegal, saying that, no, this is a law, you have to do it. And they know there are penalties in terms of financial and reputational risk of being caught to have breached the Equality Act, I think can be a powerful argument for doing things. But as I said, I'm not a lawyer. I am also not somebody who works in your particular businesses. So I don't want to go into too much into that detail, but it is an important part of the arguments for equality and diversity that we have the Equality Act, and that are legal standards you have to meet. What I want to talk more about is what I call the instrumental case for equality and diversity. And this is simply, how can businesses, how can organizations benefit from doing equality and diversity well? Because I think there's always a danger with equality and diversity, is it becomes kind of a nice to have. It's a nice thing we do when we're not doing the stuff that actually makes us money. And I think the danger of that mentality is it becomes something that people do at like the end of their working day, or when they've got through everything else on their to-do list. It's like, if I have half an hour, I will do what the nice man from E&D asked me to do. But like, to me, I genuinely believe that equality and diversity is like essential to a well-run organization. A consultant we at the university worked with a couple of years ago, I think, put it really well, which is, best practice helps everybody, bad practice hurts women and minorities. That the stuff you have to do for equality and diversity isn't about massively reorganizing your industry in ways that are going to dull its effectiveness. It's actually about making you more effective. And I think the first thing to say about equality and diversity at the kind of the most base level is, we live in an ever more diverse society. If you take race, which I think is a good place to start, every cohort of, and we always think of 18, 19-year-olds at the university, but every cohort of children born in the UK every year is less white than the year before. There is an explosion in a very different type of Britain, increasingly and BAME, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic, increasing number of people who are mixed race, and a company organization that cannot serve Black, Asian, minority ethnic people is going to struggle now. It's going to struggle more in 10 years. It's going to struggle more in 20 years. It's going to struggle more in 30 years. Likewise, when we take LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans people are more out than they used to be, because they are able, because I'm bisexual, because we are able to be more out than we used to be. That the numbers of people who are not just talking about not being heterosexual or cisgender, but actually acting on it, because we no longer have to fear being closeted, has increased. I mean, I think there's been some surveys in America when the proportion of people who are out as being lesbian, gay, or bisexual has just exploded in the past 20, 30 years. And we're starting to see the same increases in terms of trans and non-binary people. So again, if you can't sell if you are not set up to sell your products, sell your services to LGBT people, that hurts your business now. It hurts your business now more than it did 10 years ago, and it will hurt your business more in 10 years in the future than it does now. And I can go all through the different characteristics. and said we are just a more diverse society. People from diverse backgrounds are more assertive about expressing and valuing their diversity than they once were. And Barack Obama is in the news because he's got his memoirs out. You know, Barack Obama has spoken about how at one point in a different era, he called himself Barry because he was almost ashamed of his kind of, you know, different background and wanted to fit in. And he went through the process of kind of coming to terms and owning the fact his African heritage and being proud of his Barack name. So crucially, if you as a business just cannot deal with diversity, cannot engage with diversity in an effective way, it is going to be harder for you to sell things. It's going to be harder for you to sell services. And that's where any business is for. And so that's a key reason, most of all, a key reason it comes in terms of the instrumental side to be good at equality and diversity. The second thing, though, is more I think more profound, which is prejudice, discrimination. These aren't, they're not shrewd strategies. They're irrational beliefs. And if you obviously, any business knows that you shouldn't really be governed by irrationality, that you should be trying to make evidence-based decisions, that you should be trying to make the right decision at all times, rather than going with like crude generalizations or stereotypes. And so if you embed equality and diversity, you're embedding ways to ensure that you make a more rational, considered, evidence-based evidence-based decisions at key parts of, you know, delivering your work. And I think the best example you can see for this is when it comes to staff recruitment. You know, recruiting staff is hard. You know, there's a famous, I can never remember if it's 33% or 66%, but there's that famous statistic that every interview panel, more times than not, doesn't actually hire the right person. That actually interviewing people is an incredibly difficult task to do, to identify who is the right person. But if you as a workplace are like have this mindset of, well, I'm never going to hire people from this category, or I just don't think people from this category can do the job, then you are making it even more likely that you will hire the wrong person. That if you embed equality and diversity into your staff recruitment processes, you're embedding ways to make sure that you get the right person, that you're not just sitting there thinking, well, this person's the right person for the job because of whatever crude stereotype you have in your head. And the thing is, like, some of these biases that can creep into recruitment processes are both silly but really insidious. So it's things like managers hiring people that remind them of themselves. Well, that depends whether the manager's good at his job, but also it means you can get groupthink and you can get organizations that can't expand their horizons and think about beyond their current management team's experiences and prejudices. So I think there's a key thing in terms of, if you're good at equality and diversity, you will get better people for your business, you'll make better recruitment decisions when you're hiring people. But also, to go back to the first point, you know, people know workplaces that have poor reputations when it comes to equality and diversity. So if you get a reputation as somewhere where actually women aren't treated very well, or people from ethnic minorities that tend not to get promoted, people will avoid you and people will decide to go elsewhere. So again, you will not only be making the wrong decisions of the applicants who come before you, but you'll actually have a lesser pool of applicants because you're scaring away good candidates due to the bad reputation your organization has developed for itself. This is why organizations such as Stonewall, which is the UK's leading LGBT plus advocacy organization, has developed things like the top 100 employers, because employers want to show to LGBT plus people that they're good places to work in. I mean, that's why we value the Stonewall Workplace Equality Index. There is also the fact that in terms of the staff you already have, good equality and diversity is essential in terms of making sure that they feel valued and appreciated and supported. You know, we've already talked a bit about, you know, things like you know, if you have people that are either on purpose or by accident adopting racist or sexist or other forms of discriminatory behavior, then that is going to bleed into how current staff members are being treated. It may mean people aren't getting the ability to get promoted as they would like. It may be that their workplace isn't being organized in a way that's congealed for their maximum effectiveness. It may be that they are dealing with abuse, harassment. That just means they can't do their job. And what this all means is that if you want your staff members to kind of feel secure and satisfied in work, and of course, if they're secure and satisfied in work, they'll be more productive, you need good equality and diversity procedures. More importantly, when you think of, particularly I think with sex discrimination and discrimination against disabled people, you are dealing with things where it's actually making sure that your workplace is set up to ensure that people can fulfill their
Will, I think you've frozen a moment there.
full potential. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, Will, sorry, if you can just rewind probably about a minute there, you froze.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just got the warning. So I'll just moving on to how you treat current staff members. And the thing with current staff members is obviously we all know that staff members who feel safe, secure, supported are the most effective, productive staff members. And good equality and diversity is a way of ensuring that all staff members feel safe, secure, and supported. If you don't have good equality and diversity practices and policies, you will run the risk of staff members having to deal with people, managers who won't promote them, managers who won't take their ideas seriously, or overt bullying. All things I think we know just will destroy a staff member's ability to do their job, destroy their motivation, destroy their sense of well-being. If you take that further though, like particularly I think in the areas of gender and disability equality, you are also dealing with ways of how you structure your workplace to ensure that people can actually do the job. In terms of gender equality, you always have to be careful of this. It's a bit of an odd two-step. Because of the wider issues in society where women tend to take on more care and responsibilities for children, for elderly relatives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In the workplace, things to, family-friendly policies benefit women more than men. Now, we're not saying there's anything inherently that women should be the lead caregivers, because they shouldn't. It should be an equal partnership between men and women. But because of the realities in society, if you don't have a family-friendly approach in your workplace, you will be disadvantaging women. And the best example of this is in the gender pay stats, because what you see with them, there is like a intrinsic gender pay gap between men and women, but it's relatively small compared to the huge pay gap between men, women without children, and women with children. That is actually when the gender pay gap really starts to rise, because women tend to take off more time when they have children. So they take more maternity leave than men take in paternity leave. So women often struggle to claw back the lost earning during those periods off. And then there are issues in terms of, if you're a business where you need someone to do that thing, 2 hours notice, and I've got to work all evening to get that thing done, that is obviously going to hurt the ability of people who are the lead caregiver to actually do the work. So what you end up with is, in many professions, it's not the best person for the job, it's the person who can do it at the shortest notice and into the evening. So when it comes to gender equality, family-friendly policies help you ensure that you appoint the best person, because you're more likely to help women do the job, do senior jobs, but it will still benefit men. I mean, in the university, when we did our Athena Swan work, which is about gender equality, we spoke about family-friendly policies that we'd already introduced. And we had men say, these policies were great because they actually helped us as well, and they helped us spend more time with our families as well. When it comes to disability equality, you're talking about what are often called reasonable adjustments, and you're talking about, is there something that somebody cannot do due to their disability, or have you just designed something in a way that excludes a person who can do it because you've not taken into account their disability in a proper way? And I think the best example of this has to be is what we're all going through now, which is things like Zoom calls and Microsoft Teams meetings. In the past, we at the university have worked on stuff about, can people work from home if due to their disability they can't always get in at a certain time? And in parts of the university there was resistance to these types of ideas and remote working, but actually now everybody can do it. But how many people 1, 2, 5, 10 years ago were excluded from doing jobs where actually they could have been doing them remotely? And again, in your workplace, it's thinking through the same things. Are there things that we're insisting people do that actually may cause barriers to disabled people doing those jobs that actually they don't have to do? There's another way of doing the same thing that gets the same results, and that will be fine. Can everybody hear me? So I'm getting the message about my internet connection again.
Yeah, you're fine at the moment. Well,
just as I was saying that remote working makes things a lot easier to do in different ways. The internet having a joke with me there. So again, think through how good equality and diversity practice means you better support your staff members, you better unleash their potential. So I said, just to recap the three things I said, so equality and diversity helps you reach different customers. Equality and diversity helps you recruit the right staff members, and it helps you support the staff members you currently have. And I think if you went to any organization and said, I have something that will help you attract new, different customers, help you recruit better staff members, help you support the staff members you already have, you wouldn't have to kind of give them the kind of moral uplifting story of this is the right thing to do. You also want to have to give them the stern talking to about this is what you're legally required to do. People say, no, actually, no, those three reasons are reason enough to do this thing. What is this amazing thing that you're trying to get us to do? But people tend not to think of equality and diversity in that way. The final thing I would say on this instrumental side though as well is equality and diversity is one of those things where I think people can really tell the difference between when it's embedded in your culture, when you're doing it all the time, and kind of when you're cramming in a crisis. And I think you saw that a lot with how different organizations responded to the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, because you had some organizations that had equality and diversity embedded in their organization, and so they had strong links with, say, their Black staff members, the Black customers, the local Black community where they operated, and they could kind of process the news. They could process the requests for them to say something, to do something, and engage in a effective, sensitive, appropriate way. And then you had organizations that were, quite frankly, just caught out by surprise and kind of blundered into arguments, right? I won't mention the company, it's nothing to do with the university, but there was one small business I know of that was so flustered by demands they talk about Black Lives Matter, they went to an African-American contractor they'd only used once to ask him to write their Black Lives Matter statement, which he then exposed and criticized them for doing because he thought it was offensive. So this is where, good equality and diversity practice now means that you are prepared to deal effectively when these flashpoints, these crises happen. But also, of course, if you're good at equality and diversity, it makes it less likely that you will be one of those flashpoints in one of those crises. So they're the arguments for equality and diversity. There are many others, I'm sure, but they're in terms of the instrumental side, they're the key ones I think of. Does anybody have any questions on them?
Let everybody have just a little moment to think. I just wrote a couple of things down, Will. You mentioned towards the start of the session about equality and diversity being about protecting everybody. So whilst there is the protected characteristics, it is also that they are there to protect everybody.
Mhm.
I have seen instances just over the years, really, in different situations, different businesses, nothing really to do with the universities, as I've only been here since March. So, but where organisations have gone to the extreme of trying to support protected characteristics to the point where you could argue that they were discriminatory against those what they would class as without protected characteristics. So, for example, you said about gender being a protected characteristic, which includes men and women. So obviously there are a lot of female initiatives out there, women in business, all those sorts of things, and all the reasons you talked about where women often get discriminated against. But I have come across businesses that have said things like, we need more women on our board, which is a fair enough statement. But then when they have gone out to recruit for a job, they want to recruit a woman, which I understand that there are areas where you need to make sure you have a diverse population of staff, but surely that's discriminatory as well, is it not? If you're particularly saying, well, we don't actually want a man,
So it's an interesting question. First of all, we have to remember everybody has those protected characteristics.
Exactly.
So it's not, and I know everybody does it, but we should always be in the mindset of it's not person with a protected characteristic, person without. So take ethnicity. Obviously, I'm white, but I'm quite red in the face. But I'm white. I have that protected characteristic.
Yeah.
Even though obviously traditionally you're thinking of discrimination against Black, Asian, minority ethnic people. In terms of your question, the basic thing is one of the things I think people sometimes get confused with the Equality Act is positive discrimination is illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Discrimination of all kinds is illegal unless there's some various exemptions.
Yeah.
But discrimination is illegal. What there is positive action. Now, what positive action is when it's proportionate. So, and again, what I was saying at the beginning, what we're always trying to do is we think there are these unlevel playing fields, we're trying to level them up. What we're never trying to do is tilt it the opposite way, because that's when you get into positive discrimination. So everything you have to do is proportionate to the discrimination you think's happened in the past, and it isn't going into the point where you're overcorrecting. Now, in terms of the example, type of examples you were giving, obviously things like awareness raising is good. So things like women in industry. The type of statements you're talking about, they are called positive action statements. We particularly invite applicants from
Of course,
They again are fine because you're basically saying, no, we don't have many people in our industry in this organization from this particular demographic group. And we want to get more people in. In terms of the actual hiring process, like you can't say we are going to hire a woman come what may, because you're meant to hire.
It's discrimination.
You're meant to hire the best person for the job. Now there is one exception to this, and this is a fascinating story. The Labour Party has all women shortlists for their MPs. Where they say we would only hire a woman to be a candidate in this seat. When that was first introduced in the 90s, that was taken to court by a man as discrimination as illegal discrimination under the Sex Discrimination Act, and he won. So when New Labour came into power, because this was under the Conservatives, when New Labour came into power in the 1997-2001 Parliament, they amended the Sex Discrimination Act to allow all women shortlists. So that was the book. So you can't say, unless you are a political party selecting candidates for Parliament, you cannot say we will only hire women for this job unless you need to have a woman. Like, so say if it's a sexual violence shelter and you need a woman for that job, that's called a genuine occupational requirement.
Yeah.
Now there are things you can do And one of the ones which my colleague Davinder Singh is piloting in the university is things like equal merit clauses. So at the moment, I'm sure everybody who's shortlisted, who's either shortlisted or been on a recruitment panel has been in this situation. You do your interview and you get down to two candidates and they're both basically as good. And you're trying to say, well, which one is 9.5 and which one is 9 out of 10? And you're really trying to sweat the small differences to make your decision about which one you're going to hire. And so there is equal merit. You can use the equal merit clause. You can have equal merit clauses where you're like, well, if we have two candidates that are equally good, we will go with the person from the demographic group that is underrepresented in our workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine because that's proportionate, because you are appointing the best person for the job. You're just not going through that final stage where you make sure out of the two best people for the job, which one is slightly better. Mm-hmm. Likewise, you get things things like where you promise to give everybody an interview if they meet a certain demographic group. I think there's the blue tick scheme where you offer that for all disabled applicants, where every disabled applicant gets an interview. There's the Rooney Rule, which is named after some of the American sports leagues, where every shortlist will have at least one non-white person on it. And so again, they're fine because fundamentally they are positive action. You are not ruling out the possibility of hiring somebody that does not meet the underrepresented, disadvantaged demographic group that you're trying to reach. So yes, it's all whenever you're doing equality and diversity, it's always important not to overcorrect, because then you might go into positive discrimination territory.
And I think that's where I've seen examples, and I don't think it's at all been intentional, but I think people have tried to do, like as you said, the morally right thing. They've tried to take all the right positive action steps, but have perhaps gone that bit further and discriminated against ultimately the other, so if it is gender, they've gone, oh, we need to support women, and actually in turn ends up discriminating against men. And I think it's that recognition of making sure that, as you highlighted earlier, which was a really good point, everybody has a protected characteristic. It isn't just a case of because somebody's female, they have it and a man doesn't, because actually they do as well. And that, I think, can be sometimes quite a common mistake, that people haven't actually intended to do wrong. It's just they've perhaps tried to take it a little bit to the extreme and ended up in a situation they shouldn't be. So that was just
all about proportionality. That's the key
absolutely
thing. As long as you're being proportionate, you shouldn't go wrong. And as I said, when it comes to staff recruitment, as long as you should the ability to give for everybody to get the job should always be maintained. So you should never, unless there's a reason, I said that no, genuine occupational requirement, unless there's a reason why you need somebody from a particular background, for example, obviously, a priest needs to come from the religion they're trying to be a priest of,
of course,
unless outside of those rare examples, your recruitment processes should still retain the ability to appoint the best, whoever you want to, the best candidate for the job. But there are steps you can take to make it more likely that you identify the person from the underrepresented background or the disadvantaged group within your workforce that actually will be best placed to do the job.
Absolutely. Anybody else got any questions or thoughts? Happy to switch the recorded off if anybody would like their questions off the recording. I know equality and diversity questions can sometimes be a little bit sensitive.
So try people think of their any final questions. I'll just finish off by saying, in terms of what you can do when it comes to equality and diversity, and this will, I appreciate we're running out of time, so I'll be quite quick with this. I mean, the key things are, one, obviously make sure you're having equality and diversity training. I think that is a key requirement, and make sure you're keeping it relatively up to date and refreshing. We at the university say that people have to redo their equality and diversity training every 2 years, which I think is probably a good standard. But I think more broadly than that is, one, make sure that your staff, if you're a large organization, I know if you're a small one, this isn't possible, but make sure your staff who are of a minority background, or are women if they are in the minority in your workforce. Make sure they have the ability to self-organize and raise issues that they encounter to your organization. We have staff networks at the university. We have an LGBT plus staff network, a BAME staff network, a disabled staff network, and just recently a women's staff network. And in my experience, they do excellent work in terms of just giving that kind of group that can raise issues to senior management. But also, as you're trying to change things within your organization, they are extremely useful as a sounding board to say, we've encountered this issue, we've thought of this, what do you think we should do? What's the best approach to take? Have clear procedures. Like, as I was talking about earlier, a lot of areas where you kind of breach equality and diversity is when you're kind of trading on assumptions, stereotypes, the dreaded gut instinct. The more you have clear procedures that people have to follow and they have to evidence they've followed them, the less likely you are to actually break equality law, to do equality and diversity badly. If you take recruitment, for example, if you follow a very clear recruitment process with very clear job criteria, with very clear processes for your interview panels and how they record what led them to make their decision, that's less likely to go wrong than if you literally have one person picking people that he's spoken to in a very unstructured, informal way. And then it is, and this is one where I'm a bit of a data nerd, and this can be controversial, but it is, using data wisely. It is, recording, who's using your organization, how satisfied they are with your organization, how many employees you have, how many applications have you had to work for you, and actually analyzing that based on demographic data and seeing if you can identify any trends. Because that actual data analysis will give you warning signs when things are wrong, and it'll give you a way of understanding what has gone wrong. So to give you an example from the university, for women, we have an issue of getting women in senior academic posts. For BAME people, we just have an issue of getting Black, Asian, minority ethnic people in senior posts more generally, not just limited to academia. But actually, when we looked at the data, we could see that there isn't an issue in terms of the applications process when it comes to women, because more women get shortlisted than men, more women get offered a job after an interview panel than men. Actually, the issue is in the number of applications. That actually our job descriptions were basically discouraging women who could do the job from applying. There's a lot of evidence that says that women apply for jobs they think they are qualified to do, men apply for jobs they think they can do. And so if you have stuff that you don't need in job descriptions, you can scare women applicants away, even though they could easily do the job. With BAME applicants, we could see that actually BAME applicants were less likely to be shortlisted than white applicants, and BAME people who got to interview were less likely to be offered a job than white people who got into the interview. So there's actually an issue with our recruitment processes that we need to address. So similar issues, when you got into the data, you'd understand actually what was going on and what you needed to do to rectify it. So yes, I know using data can be controversial, and stats is for prats and all that, but actually you can get a lot of information by actually collecting and monitoring your data.
Thank you. Has anybody got any final questions before we finish off today?
Not so much a question, but an observation. I'd agree with everything you're saying there, Will. And it's got to start from the top. We've got to get this into the boards. We've got to get this into the exec teams, and we've got to start. And diversity, you automatically go to colour, and you go to sex, and you go to race, etc. It's not just that. It's about, are all your board from Solihull, for example? Do they all play tennis on a Sunday afternoon? It's actually, how do we open up that group thought and stop that, well, increase that diversity of thought, and doing it in all the groups. I mean, there are talked about positive action statements, which I totally agree, and I think we run the risk, as we said there earlier, about going too far the other way. I mean, we used to run started off as a women leadership group, and actually more women would complain about it than would actually attend it, because they didn't want to be seen as a separate entity. And actually, we didn't get any men to it, and we're still in the position, and rightly or wrongly, I'm not justifying it, but still in the position that we've got to influence the men at the top to make the decisions change. So there's no point doing something like that if it's actually having a negative effect.
Yeah.
So it's a fine tightrope, isn't it?
That's why I asked what I asked earlier, because I would, as a woman, not like to think that I've been favoured because I'm a woman either. So I want equal access to the job, and I don't want to be discriminated against because I'm a woman. But equally, I want to know that I've been recruited because I am the best person for the job, and not because somebody has thought we need to tick a box and we need, you know, more women on the board, or we need more women in the senior management team. So I think it's that, like, as you say, that balance. And equally, I've never gone on a women in leadership course because I believe that as a female leader, I need to also know how to interact with and communicate with men to be able to be effective in a senior management position. And whilst I do advocate women in leadership courses, and I think that, you know, there's some fantastic initiatives out there, it's just making sure that you don't put people into a bubble and you put them into a bracket and say, well, they're over in that group and separate to men. You know, I don't see the need for that, I suppose. So it's that, as Will's identified, really, that positive action, but not discriminating in the other way as well.
Yeah, just pick up one thing actually Callum said, which is diversity of thought. That is another strong argument for quality and diversity. You know, just common sense. People from different backgrounds bring different ideas into the mix, different ways of looking at it. And I think the best example I saw of this is the weirdest one. And there was some research done in America that said that the hedge funds whose managers had daughters, tended to appoint more female people within the hedge fund brokers. And those hedge funds were both more effective and had lower employee satisfaction. Because they were more, and the theory of this is that basically, because you had a more diverse workforce, there were more arguments, because you had people with different perspectives sharing those ideas in that kind of frank way that only the Americans can do. And that led to better decision making, because you did not have that group think, but it may have made people a bit angry. So hopefully you can have the diverse thought and the thinking outside the box without the arguments. But yeah, but there is evidence that recruiting diverse teams does lead to more diverse decision making, because you're not having people who are just like you, just like the person who had your job beforehand, who thinks things the same way.
So we've just had, I think people are starting to have other meetings now to attend. So I think a really good discussion, and a subject that I think sometimes might not raise questions straight away, because I think there's always quite a lot to think about. But some comments just coming through in the chat. A great session, definitely raised my awareness, has really got me thinking. Thank you. Good and simple examples. Really enjoyed the session. I think that's also important, Will. Thank you for that. Giving those actual examples in practice can sometimes help you to bring it to life. So thank you everybody who's attended today. We'll share the recording with you. If you do have questions that you think about after, feel free to email our exec ed inbox, of which you've got the email address for on your invite. We can always forward them to Will and pick his brains afterwards if we need to. But thank you everybody for attending today, and thank you, Will, for presenting.
So